You call it coincidence. You ran into someone you hadn't thought about in years on the one day you happened to take a different route home. You thought of a song and it played on the radio 4 minutes later. You dreamed of a phone call and the phone rang. You shrugged. You said, "What a strange world." You moved on with your day. But somewhere, long before you were born, someone was already counting. Someone was already writing down, in careful columns, exactly how strange your world is allowed to be before it stops being strange at all. There is a place where chance and meaning blur into each other, where the line between the two is not drawn by the universe, but by you. You have crossed that line more times than you can count, and you have never once noticed the crossing. This is that invisible place at the edge of reality. In February of 1986, in the state of New Jersey, a woman named Evelyn Marie Adams bought a lottery ticket. She was not a gambler. She bought tickets the way many people do, occasionally, almost as a joke against herself. That month, her numbers came up. She won $400,000 paid out over time. It was, by any measure, an extraordinary piece of luck, the kind that happens to one person in millions, and then, statistically, should never happen to that same person again. 4 months later, Evelyn Marie Adams bought another ticket. She won again. The newspapers did what newspapers do. They ran the story with breathless astonishment. The odds of winning a major lottery twice, reporters said, were 1 in 17 trillion. 17 trillion. A number so large it stops meaning anything to the human mind. A number built to make you feel that something other than chance had to be at work. Was it fate? Was she chosen? Had the universe, for reasons of its own, decided to bend its rules around one woman in New Jersey? Two statisticians thought the question itself was the problem. Persi Diaconis, a mathematician at Harvard who had once worked as a professional magician before turning to probability theory, and Frederick Mosteller, a pioneer of applied statistics, sat down with Adams' case and asked a quieter, more dangerous question. Not, how likely was this to happen to her, but how likely was this to happen to someone, somewhere, given how many lottery tickets are sold every single day across the world? The answer, when they published it in 1989 in a paper that would quietly become a landmark in the study of coincidence, was unsettling in its own way. Given the sheer number of people buying tickets across the country, across the decades, the odds that someone, at some point, would win a major lottery twice were not 1 in 17 trillion. They were roughly 1 in 30. Not extraordinary at all. Almost expected. Diaconis and Mosteller gave this principle a name: the law of truly large numbers. It states simply that with a sample size large enough, any outrageously improbable event becomes almost certain to happen to somebody. Not to you specifically, not on purpose, but to someone inevitably, because there are so many someones, and so many days and so many chances for the unlikely to land on a single, ordinary life. There is an older cousin to this idea, first sketched out by the British mathematician John Edensor Littlewood, decades earlier. Littlewood proposed that a miracle could be defined, mathematically, as an event with odds of 1 in a million. Then he did the math on how many events a person actually witnesses in a lifetime, how many small perceptions, encounters, and decisions accumulate hour after hour, year after year. He calculated that a person experiencing about one event per second, while awake, for about 8 hours a day, would witness roughly a million events every 35 days, which means, by his own definition, every person should expect to experience a miracle, on average, about once a month. Not because the universe is reaching toward you, because you are a long-running experiment, and long-running experiments produce rare results simply by running long enough. But knowing this, mathematically, does almost nothing to the feeling. That is the part the equations cannot touch, and this is where the Israeli psychologist Ruma Falk enters the story. Falk spent years studying not whether coincidences happen, but why human beings feel them so violently when they do. In her research through the 1980s and 1990s, she found something quietly devastating about the architecture of the human mind. We are almost incapable of correctly judging the improbability of an event after it has already happened to us. Before the event, we can calculate odds with some accuracy. After it, something shifts. The event stops being one outcome among millions of possible outcomes and becomes, in our minds, the only outcome that could have mattered. Falk called this the problem of the reference class. We ask, what were the odds of this exact thing happening to me right now, in this way? We almost never ask, What were the odds of something like this happening to someone, eventually, in some form? And because we asked the wrong question, we arrive, every time, at the wrong answer. We arrive at the feeling of fate. Evelyn Marie Adams, for her part, never claimed to be chosen. She gave interviews afterward describing her wins matter-of-factly, almost apologetically, as if she understood, better than the headlines did, that she had simply stood in the right place when an inevitable lightning strike came down. The lightning was always going to land somewhere. It happened to be her. Carl Jung, writing decades before any of this was measured, had already given a name to the feeling itself, even without the mathematics behind it. He called it synchronicity, the experience of two unrelated events aligning in a way that feels meaningful to the person experiencing them. Jung was not interested in whether the universe was actually conspiring. He was interested in why the human mind insists that it must be. He suspected the insistence said more about the architecture of human meaning-making than about the architecture of the cosmos. Diaconis, working 70 years later with spreadsheets instead of dream journals, arrived in the same place from the opposite direction. The coincidence is real. The meaning is manufactured. And the manufacturing happens so fast, so seamlessly, that you never catch yourself doing it. So the next time it happens to you, the song, the stranger, the dream that came true an hour later, ask yourself the question Falk would have asked, not what are the odds of this exact thing happening to me, but across every person, every day, every coincidence-shaped event quietly unfolding around the planet right now, what are the odds that something like this would happen to somebody? The number will be smaller than you think. The mystery will not disappear. It will simply move from the universe to you. You still call it coincidence. But somewhere behind the word, the columns are still being kept. Every stranger you've recognized on a street that wasn't yours, every song that arrived exactly when you needed it, every dream that seemed to know something before you did was never a message sent for you alone. It was a number waiting its turn, and your life was simply where it landed this time. You are not chosen. You are not being watched by some pattern that knows your name. You are something far stranger than that. You are large enough, and you have lived long enough that the impossible was always going to happen to you eventually. It already has. It already did. And it is waiting, quietly, patiently, somewhere, just past the edge of what you'd call an ordinary day, to happen again. It was never coincidence. It was only math finally catching up to you.